As I have watched and observed successful people, what I have discovered about them is they really have figured out why they're here. They really do have their act together. And knowing their purpose in life is a stability for them. So that when everyone else is rocking and rolling and things are a little unsteady and people are kind of leaving the ship and people are kind of abandoning their causes, these people, they hold steady right throughout the storm because they have a true North Star. They truly are focused. It becomes an anchor in their life that just holds them steady. And the anchor is a confidence based upon a knowledge of purpose.
And I say to you that if you begin to take a conscious effort to find out what it is that you're supposed to do, I say that it can literally save your life.
Life happens for you. It happens for you. Opportunities will come to you every day. It's either for you can remain scared of the opportunities, or you can embrace them and take them.
I think that many of us don't go the next step because we don't know what to do yet. And I say that the reason that we don't even explore the possibility of what to do is because subconsciously we don't believe that it can happen for us, and we don't believe that we deserve it. So here's what I'm suggesting. How much time do you spend working on you? How much time do you spend every day working on your dream?
You got to take ownership. I take full responsibility. And I'll do whatever it takes. I take ownership. I'll get up. I'll stay late. And that's why you point the finger. That's why you say he did it and she did it. Because you don't like how the pain feels. That's why you give the power away. Because it hurt too bad to say, I did it. I take ownership. It was my fault. You ain't ready for the pain. You never looked at yourself in the mirror and said, you let you die. I am not phenomenally skilled, but I'm phenomenally willed. My IQ may never change, but my will changes every year. I get stronger and stronger and more determined. Why? Because it's in my DNA.
Now, I have found most people want to improve their income. You know, there's two things that you must know if you really want to create wealth. You have to know where you are, and you have to know where you're going. Now, that is so simple and so obvious. Why are so many people stuck? Think about it for a moment. Really give it serious thought. Now, I used to think, and I think most people do, these people don't have goals. But, you know, they may not have taken a pen and really clearly defined their goal, but I think they do have a target. They want to make things better. I don't think that's where the problem is. I think the problem's right down here in where we are. Most people don't know why they're where they are. You see, I have found one thing. Everyone knows how to do a better job than they're doing. That's not the problem. We do know how. The problem is we're not doing what we know how to do. Why aren't we? Well, there's an answer to that, and there's your answer. It's paradigms. Paradigms are the problem. Why is it that paradigms are holding us back? Well, I think we have to ask ourselves, what is a paradigm? A paradigm is a mental program that has almost exclusive control over our habitual behavior. And almost all of our behavior is habitual. You know, Joel Barker wrote a book on paradigms way back around 1990. He said to be able to shape your future, you have to be willing and able to change your paradigm.
Success is a doing. You've got to actually do it. Activity is high priority in the life process to try to get maximum benefit out of what we have available. Activity. Now, here's an important question. What is your philosophy about activity? What about hard work? What about long hours? What about full days? If you're doing something, how hard should you go at it? How much time should you put in? Everybody has to develop their philosophy about activity. Just by way of review, let me quote you Old Testament says, 6 days activity, 1 day rest. That's called philosophy of ratio of activity. What is a good ratio of rest and activity? Old Testament says 6 days of one, 1 day of the other. We've all got to have a philosophy about activity, because your philosophy of activity will affect the rest of your life. Not to think so is naive.
Your gift will make room for you. Now, what is your gift? It's the thing that you do the absolute best with the least amount of effort. That's your gift. Quit running away from the gift.
It's the stuff that has consequence. It's family, it's work. That's
yeah,
exactly
well,
right.
Freedom is.
But we're not teaching young men that.
No.
Intentionally, that's the other thing I wanted to get to, but go ahead.
Right.
I think it's intentional.
Well, I think it is too, because it's part and parcel of the idea that the productive activity of young men, and this also goes for the masculine, symbolically masculine activity of young women, by the way, but the productive activity of young men is indistinguishable from the force that gives rise to the crushing tyranny of the patriarchy. It's like, well, and that also gives young men a moral excuse not to engage in life. It's like, well, productive activity is for fools.
I see it all the time. I've been told I'm a horrible person my whole life. What use is this to me? I'm going to go play video games in my basement.
Yeah, well, and it gives an excuse to the useless part of men that don't want to succeed, because it's easy to sit around. I mean, it isn't, because the long-term consequences of that are just absolutely devastating.
Yes.
But see, so when we have a discussion about freedom, we might also say, well, the freedom is, I think this is right, it's freedom to pick your poison. It's freedom to pick your responsibility.
That's correct.
And you might say, well, that there's a set of weights in front of you that you have to pick up in order to stand yourself. Because that's the other thing I think about human beings. Well, conscientiousness is a trait. And we don't have an animal model for conscientiousness. In fact, we don't understand conscientiousness at all from a psychological perspective.
Or Darwinian perspective.
Well, that's more complicated, because conscientious men tend to do better, and so they're going to be more successful. But we don't have a model for what conscientiousness is. But conscientiousness is, at least in part, the necessity to carry a load for yourself and for other people, or to suffer guilt and shame as a consequence. And so that seems built in, especially to conscientious people. Now, conscientious people tend to be more conservative, because that's one of the predictors of conservatism. But it could easily be that freedom is the freedom to choose your yoke, let's say. And then you choose the weight that you have to carry, so that you can justify your miserable existence to yourself, so that you can go to bed at the end of the night and you can think, look, I did what I needed to do to set things right today, and I don't have to carry the existential weight around of my failure and uselessness as a consequence. The existential psychologists in the 1950s who emerged out of the chaos of World War II were very much concentrated on the idea of existential guilt, that you owed being a ransom for your existence. And the way that you paid that ransom was to work for the betterment of being. I mean, it's a very ancient idea, but it is the one idea, I think, that gives people the self-respect, not self-esteem, the self-respect that's necessary to carry them through terrible times.
When I'm asked, well, what has Jordan Peterson done for your members, people you know, I say, he has them to stop acting like Peter Pan, so that they can actually be a man and not a boy.
So the Peter Pan story is a really interesting one, because Peter Pan means everything, right? Technically, that's what Pan means. And Peter Pan wants to be a child because a child can be anything, can be everything, right? So what you have in childhood is that a plethora of potential. And the problem with growing up is that you have to sacrifice that Pan potential for a defined actuality, right? That's to grow up and become something instead of staying potentially anything. Now, the problem with Peter Pan is that he looks into the world and sees Captain Hook as his role model, right? And so that's his model for adulthood. And Hook is terrified of death. That's the crocodile that's chasing him with the clock in his stomach. And the crocodile already has a piece of him. It's got a taste of him. And so Hook is constantly chased by the dragon of chaos, essentially, that's already got a taste of him. And because Hook is terrified of his own mortality and terrified in general, he's a tyrant. And so Pan looks at Hook and says, well, if that's adulthood, I'd rather stay king of the lost boys.
That's exactly
right. And so, yeah, and it's a very powerful story, which is why people still tell it.
What's one piece of advice that you would have given your 16-year-old self?
Don't be so high and mighty that you don't take advantage of the humble opportunities that are granted to you. When I look back, I didn't like school at all. You might say I hated it. And I've thought a lot about that, because I thought, well, there were reasons. I was a very fast reader. I could get through the books that were given to us in English class, generally in the first day. And that wasn't really appreciated, I would say. But there were things, and I was bored a lot as a teenager and got into a reasonable amount of trouble, not an unreasonable amount, but then, there were sports teams and there were attempts to organize plays, and there were things that I didn't do that I could have that would have made my life better. But I was too cynical, maybe, to take full advantage of them. And I did work when I was a kid. I worked in restaurants as a dishwasher, short order cook, that sort of thing. That was a really good decision. I think my fondest memories in some ways of my adolescence are memories of working in the restaurant. But life is very difficult, and in order to thrive with this difficult life, if an opportunity is presented to you, you shouldn't be so arrogant that you dismiss it. And it's really easy to be arrogant as a teenager, especially if you're smart, because you think, well, I'm smarter than everybody else. It's like, actually, no. There's lots of people that are a lot smarter than you. You just haven't met them yet. And you're not as smart as you think you are, besides, and other people aren't as dumb as you think they are either.
He would beat my ass when I was 5 years old. There's a testosterone thing that just happens between sons and their fathers.
And he wanted sympathy. And I said, if you want sympathy, go home to your mother and get it.
He said, you are throwing it all away. It is the worst mistake you will ever make. And I wish I had someone who could just pull me aside and, hey, it'll be okay. It'll be okay. But I wish I knew that. My dad got into professional wrestling in the 60s and the 70s.
250 pounds, Rocky Johnson.
Where it was an all-white wrestling business, an all-white audience. And at that time in the late 60s, where racial tension and divide was still very strong and the wounds were still there. But he was able to change behavior, the audience's behavior. So this all-white audience who would never cheer a black man cheered him in these arenas. He would get up at usually 5:30 in the morning, and he would say, if I get up, you're going to get up too. Yes. And I wouldn't work out, but he would just make sure that I was there and be with him. And that was our time that we could spend together. My dad always said too, that regardless of what you do in life and where you go, respect is going to be given when it's earned, and you have to go out and earn it every single day. The thing that has worked for me is to remember the hard times. I was evicted when I was 14. We were kicked off the island. We couldn't live in Hawaii. Had no place to live. My mom and I came home, and I'll never forget, the rent was $180 a week. And there was an eviction a week. And there was an eviction notice on the door. And it was the final eviction notice. My mom started crying, and I never forgot in that moment. It was a seminal moment for me because I felt like I never want to be in this position again. What can I do? So at 14 years old, I thought, well, the heroes in my life, Muhammad Ali, for example, professional wrestlers, they're all men who have worked hard with their hands and they built their body. Yes, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do what my dad taught me and these other heroes. I'm going to go build my body so we're never evicted again.
And at that time, we were at an all-time low, I think, with our family. And I am already a pretty big boy, 6'4", 200, maybe 20, 25 pounds. I had a very bad mustache. I had a chip on my shoulder. Fresh into this high school in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, Freedom High School. A teacher comes in. His name is Jody Swick. Tough guy. He shook my hand. I'll never forget that shake. He said, I want you to do something for me. Yes? Why don't you come out and play football for me? I said, okay. And I went out and I played football for Jody Swick. And he was our head football coach. And he became a father figure to me and a mentor. I fell in love with the game of football, and I started getting recruited from every college across the country. My thought process started to change. That's when I started thinking about goals and what I wanted to accomplish.
My goal was to play in the NFL. Again, because we didn't have a lot of money, so I wanted to be the first one to buy my parents a house, and the dream didn't come true. I didn't get drafted. I didn't get any offers, nothing. I had to work up in Canada at the Canadian Football League. When I was cut from there, my dad had to come pick me up And I'll never forget, we were on I-75. He lived in Tampa, came to Miami, got in his pickup truck. We drove up I-75. And I'm 23 years old. I am forced to move back in with my parents.
He got sassy with me one time. It was about 1.5 miles from home. And he wanted sympathy. And it was pouring down rain. And I said, if you want sympathy, go home to your mother and get it.
And I wish I had someone at that time who could just pull me aside and, hey, it's going to be okay. After about 1.5 months of staying in that little apartment and cleaning, I got a phone call from the head coach of the team who cut me, the head coach of the Calgary Stampeders. He called me and he said, hey, I know we cut you, but I'd like you to come back. I said, okay, I appreciate that, coach. Thank you very much. I'll think about it. He said, okay, great. I hung up the phone, and my dad said, you're going to do it, right? I said, no, I don't think so. And he goes, what? I said, my gut tells me I'm done. He said, what are you going to do? I took a deep breath. I said, I'd like to get into the business. He said, what business? I said, the wrestling business. He said, you are throwing it all away. It is the worst mistake you will ever make. He said, you're ruining your career.
At that time, we were living in a small apartment in Tampa, Florida, and he said, look around. This is what I have. I don't have anything. And I don't want that for you.
I said, maybe I'll be no good. But I feel like in my heart I have to do this.